Greetings to all my tech heads out there in the KevTechify Nation, and if you're new here, welcome. In this episode, we're going to look at mitigating ARP attacks. We'll be discussing ARP attacks, ARP spoofing, dynamic ARP inspection, dynamic ARP inspection implementation guidelines, and then finally we'll go over dynamic ARP inspection configuration. This episode is part of my series on network security. I'm Kevin here at KevTechify. Let's get this adventure started. In a typical attack, a threat actor can send unsolicited ARP requests to other hosts on the subnet with the MAC address of the threat actor and the IPv4 address of the default gateway. Now, there are many tools available on the internet to create these ARP man-in-the-middle attacks, including here DSNF, Kane-Enable, Ettercap, Ursina, and there's a lot more out there. IPv6 uses ICMP version 6 neighbor discovery protocol. So it doesn't have the ARP process. IPv6 doesn't have the ARP process. It has the neighbor discovery protocol. Now, IPv6 includes strategies here to mitigate neighbor advertisement spoofing, similar in the way that IPv6 prevents a spoofed ARP reply. ARP spoofing and ARP poisoning are mitigated by implementing dynamic ARP inspection, DAI, dynamic ARP inspection. In a typical ARP attack, a threat actor can send out unsolicited ARP requests to other hosts on the same subnet with the MAC address of the threat actor and the IP address of the default gateway. Dynamic ARP inspection, DAI, requires DHCP snooping, and it helps prevent ARP attacks by, first, not relaying invalid or gratuitous ARP requests out to other ports on that same VLAN. Second is by intercepting all ARP requests and replies on untrusted ports. Third is verifying each intercepted packet for a valid IP to MAC binding. Fourth is dropping and logging ARP requests coming from invalid sources to prevent our ARP poisoning. And finally, air disabling the interface if the configured dynamic ARP inspection number of ARP packets is exceeded. To mitigate the chances of ARP spoofing and ARP poisoning, there are several dynamic ARP inspection implementation guidelines you should follow. First one is to enable DHCP snooping globally. So on your switch, enable it all. Second is to enable DHCP snooping on selected VLANs. So the VLANs that you typically have clients connected to, you want to make sure that snooping is on those VLANs. Next one is to enable dynamic ARP inspection on selected VLANs. So you want to make sure DHCP snooping is there. You want to make sure your dynamic ARP inspection is there. And then finally, you want to configure trusted interfaces for DHCP snooping and ARP inspection. So you want to configure your interfaces for inspection. In our example here, S1 is connecting two users on VLAN 10. We have PCA up here as one of our users, and then we have our threat actor as a second user. Dynamic ARP inspection will be configured to mitigate against ARP spoofing and ARP poisoning. Here in our configuration example, we can see that DHCP snooping is enabled here because dynamic ARP inspection requires DHCP snooping binding tables to operate. Next, we implement DHCP snooping and ARP inspection on VLAN 10 for the PCs that are connected there. Then we go into our uplink port, FA024. So FA024 is our uplink port to our router. And we want to make that trusted. So IP DHCP snooping trust, IP ARP inspection trust. We want to make them as trusted ports for that. Dynamic ARP inspection can also be configured to check for both destination and source MAC and IP addresses. Now, our destination MAC address here, it checks the destination MAC address in the Ethernet header against the target MAC address in that ARP packet body. Then we have our source MAC here. And Dynamic ARP inspection checks the source MAC address in the Ethernet header again against the MAC address in that ARP packet body. And then finally, we have IP address. It checks that the ARP packet body for invalid and unexpected IP addresses, including all zeros, all 255s, or any multicast addresses. To configure dynamic ARP inspection to drop ARP packets when the IP addresses are invalid, we use the IP ARP inspection validate command. Now here you can either specify the destination MAC address, the IP address, or the source MAC address. For what we'll do here is we want to say we want to inspect for valid source addresses, valid destination MAC addresses, and valid IP addresses. To verify our settings, you can do a show run. Here we're including any line that has validate, and we can see that it's IP ARP inspection valid IP for that. We can also go in here, IP ARP inspection validate source MAC address, destination MAC address, or IP, do another show run, and now it's listed all three. If you do these separately, they will overwrite it. So you do IP ARP inspection validate source MAC, then you do a destination MAC, and you do IP. Each one overwrote it. That gives you just the IP. If you want to do more than that, then you come down here and you list them all in a row with a space. And then when we do our show run, we can see that all these are listed. It was my pleasure to provide you with this wonderful episode on mitigating ARP attacks. If you like this episode and you got value out of it, and of course, depending upon what platform you're using, please click that like button, give a 5-star rating, leave a comment. This all helps me bring you more great content. Please take a minute to subscribe to my channel. All of my socials and contact information are on my website, kevtechify.com, and you can get all these episodes in video and podcast form. In the upper right is my playlist for my series on network security. In the bottom right is one of my videos I think you'll really like. Thank you so much for watching this episode of my series on network security. Once again, I'm Kevin. This here is KevTechify. I'll see you next time for another great adventure.